Kat's here to tell us how to break down our monoliths, I think, in only 193 easy steps. So, Kat, all yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Kat. Feels weird to be up here. Like Chris Nova was the first speaker today, so yeah, I feel inadequate. Moving right along, 193. Why did I choose 193? Any guesses? Did I map out all the steps? No, I'm going to give you something. This is a key takeaway right now in the first 30 seconds of the talk. So if you want to leave after this, it's all good. You'll take something away. 193, odd and prime. Yeah, people don't question that. They never do. They're like, no one just chooses a prime number out of thin air, right? So if you want to provide evidence for something, just make sure that it's a prime number. Also, fun fact about me, because I'm not going to do an intro slide, 2 is my favorite number because it's even and prime. Yeah, so not going to go through 193 easy steps for anything. I talk fast, but not that fast. So yeah, let's talk about Monolith. I work at Ticketmaster. That'll be important. So this story begins in a galaxy far, far away, Hollywood. A long time ago, 2015. Yeah, so Ticketmaster got this idea. We're going to completely rewrite our core ticketing engine. We're just going to start completely over. We're not even going to talk to the people who wrote the old one. We're just going to start from scratch. Has anyone been through one of those before? Oh, a few people in the room. And it seems like you all had a positive experience, yes? Wonderful, yeah. So obviously, I think we can predict what happened there. Did end rather abruptly, but honestly, I feel like that's a good thing, right? I used to be a consultant, don't judge me too harshly, but I went into a lot of places where someone would say, let's do a complete rewrite, and then they would finish the thing even when they knew it wasn't going to work. So I actually feel proud that we didn't do that. Then the question became, what was the actual purpose of that exercise? Why were we actually trying to do that? Because things either evolve or they die, and sometimes they do both. Sometimes dying is part of the evolution. So what we're hoping to do here is evolve as the market evolves. Where do we want to evolve to? So selling tickets, that's highly transactional business. Yes, you have these high volumes over short periods of time. What would that look like if that was more based on relationships? And in order to do that, what we would have to do is just let that transaction engine sell tickets and not do all this other stuff so that we could build relationships on top of that. So this was the why. Why are we doing that? Because we want to connect fans to these experiences. Anyone familiar with this phrase? That sums up what we just talked about. People in well-tailored blue suits tend to just love it and throw it around a lot. Service pivot. So this is something that's happening in technology as a whole. It's a trend that I'm sure a lot of us have seen. Does anyone here transact with the bank of Starbucks? A few people? Yes? Yeah, so that's those things, coffee, banking, highly transactional, and Starbucks has created this ecosystem that's based on relationships, having a relationship with you, a customer. So this is something that's happening all over technology spaces and in all sorts of different industries. What I think is interesting is one company is not often able to pull off a service pivot within their company, but we see it across the industry. So Starbucks, in case you didn't know, it wasn't always a bank. Yeah, fun fact. So I joined Ticketmaster mostly because of this, because it's a company that came into being during one of these periods of evolution, during this huge paradigm shift between the pre-software industry economy in computing, where these huge enterprises would go and buy hardware, and then they had developers in-house who developed all of the software, right? You were not buying software. You had people in-house who were developing the software for you. And then there comes this transition where now you buy software. And that's where Ticketmaster was born, in this transition where people now would buy software. Another fun fact, the original Ticketmaster ticketing engine was developed on a borrowed PDP-11 in the early 70s, which I'm a millennial. That like even saying those words out loud is just ridiculous to me. But yeah, it's cool, right? So that evolution is in the blood. So I feel like if there's ever a place that this could work, I thought maybe it'll be there. This diagram, I should also add, is borrowed from Mel Conway, and then I edited it. He told me it was fine. Yes, so a thing that happened in the very beginning was not only were you teaching people how to use this software, which you're now offering, but in many cases you were teaching them how to computer, which is a strange thing, right? So this guy who likes to code on the floor, Ray, he was a mathematician. He owned a record store, and Ticketmaster said, "You're a mathematician. There's a good chance you already know how to computer. Would you like to be one of the first outlets for this?" And he's still at it, and he's on call today. I just got an email from him. Yeah, so we got to sell tickets. But what if that computer is the only computer in a business? Like, I don't even think Ray had another computer in his record store when he got the original Ticketmaster. You have to do other things to run a business. I don't know if you all know this. So yes, it's true. So they had to build the ability to produce reports and things like that into what is really a transaction engine. So it kind of, had to do all these things because there's a very real chance that it could be the only computing power in the house. Even weird things like chat. So in the early 70s, it wasn't like you hopped on Slack to chat with the other operators, right? And messaging and that type of thing. So the original even supported wild things like that. So what's the next evolution? We already talked about it. It's relationships. So how do we take this thing that's made to support transactions, be highly efficient with transactions, and how do we use it as the infrastructure to support the building of relationships? One evolution that we'll see is this. Instead of putting a request in, I need a new report, can you make this report for me and shoot it out of that transaction engine? Instead of just saying, no, we're not going to do that, we're now asking, how can we enable you to do that? So pushing those things out. And I think this is a trend just generally in the world, right? That we are trying to enable users to use no code or low code to customize things and answer the questions that they have closer to real time instead of going to someone else and asking them to answer those questions. I just realized I have my sunglasses on. It's just the lighting in here really bothers me. So it's not because I'm from Arizona, it's just the lighting. Anyway, moving right along. And then we also see these other trends with like late customization and mass customization, and that's, again, forming relationships outside of the bounds of physical space, right? What do you do when you get a new phone? Or I'm in Seattle, what do you do when you get a new Kindle? You install all your apps, right? You make it yours, yeah? Yeah, so that's that late customization. We want to enable users to use these things in the way that's right for them. How about Netflix? If we all pulled up, who here has heard of Netflix? Okay. Yeah, a few people, great. So if we all pulled up our Netflix accounts right now, do we all share an account? Okay. If we all pulled up our individual Netflix accounts, what would the home page look like? Who's watching? Exactly. Yeah, so Netflix wants to make sure that they're giving you the content that you want. So they've even, instead of trying to like squash that behavior, right, where we have multiple people logging in, they say, who's watching? Is it you, Kat? Is it whomever else, right? So again, that's where we're forming this relationship, trying to treat individual humans as individual humans and connect them with the content and the experiences that they want. Who has seen one of these before, this template? A few people. It's not super cool. I mean, it's not like anything interesting, but I'm going to use it for the rest of the talk. So the x-axis, it goes from Genesis, something that's brand new, that's just being tested in little pockets of the industry. No one's ever heard of it before. People think that you're, just doomed, going to lose your job for sure if you try these wild things. All the way to commodity, utility. These are things that if you're doing it right, people ignore them. Like, did anyone take note of the light switches in here today? Probably not, right? You only notice these things when they're not working. And then in the middle, we have custom built and product. On the y-axis, we go from invisible to whichever user or need you select, all the way to very visible to that user need. So this is called a Wardley Map. If you want to read it, this guy's like a borderline socialist and gives everything away for free, and so you can read his book for free right now. Yes, so I decided that I was going to try to use these maps to plot a course towards modernizing my pieces of this monolithic core ticketing platform. So what I'm really interested in, and what I have been really interested in now for years, is when you go somewhere and you encounter some technology, what are the mismatches? So in the industry, we are now treating compute as a commodity, right? You spin it up, spin it down. We're not like naming. When I was a little kid and I'd go into the server room with my dad, he'd be on call, he'd bring me along, and like they have names for the servers he's talking about, like it's his friend or something. That's not how we do things anymore. But some people are treating compute differently, right? And so I'm interested in those mismatches. What's the difference between how we treat this component and how the industry treats this component? So if you are evolving it more quickly than the industry and you're treating a component as a utility or a commodity and the rest of the industry is treating it as a product, that could be something that enables you strategically, right? So you're now going to spend less time on that. By the same token, if the industry is treating some piece, some component as a commodity and you're treating it as something that is unique and special, there's a good chance that you're spending a lot of resources, time, energy, money, all these things on that, the customization of that, instead of spending it incurring variety in a way that's more valuable. Does that make sense to anyone? Does that not make sense to anyone? Who's undecided? Who is mentally present in the room? Yes. So I'll just take you through one example, but obviously there's lots of different examples of needs within the ecosystem. But the first need, I need to sell tickets. I gotta sell out this show, right? So if we have that, we know that we're going to have to process these transactions through the transaction engine, through the core platform. But this evolved as something that was unique for each customer. So it's still, in a lot of ways, treated custom, even though you'd walk in anywhere else and no one's like, oh, yes, we treat our transaction engine as a beautiful little snowflake for each customer, right? So if I want to enable relationships, I need to create the space for variety in relationships on top of that platform. And what I like about these maps is I'm now looking at just this little shaded corner, and that's all the space that I have to build those relationships on top of the platform, right? And that's not a lot of space. So I need to actually make more space on that map by evolving the transaction engine more towards commodity utility. Very easy, right? I just show people this map and they're like, yeah, we're good to go. No, of course not, right? Each time you make one of those transitions, people have a lot of resistance to that, and often not just the people that work for you that are like, I'm used to treating it in this specific way. I derive my value in my job from treating these components in this specific way, but also customers who have learned to interact with your platform in a specific fashion, right? Even if you're now making it easier for them, you can still get resistance to that, yes? So what we're striving for here is to move stuff from being unique to being repeatable so that we can create this space for variety and relationships to emerge. So if we move this more towards commodity, more towards utility, we now have just actually a lot more space on the map to try things out, to experiment, and to build other things on top of that platform. There are some things, so that's the transition. There are pieces or capabilities within that platform that we want to make that transition, right? To move more towards commodity, where it's not specialized in any way per customer. What about the things that should probably just die, right? I said some things should probably die. Chat. Should we really continue to maintain our own special flavor of chat? I'm gonna go hard pass on that, right? Welcome to the 21st century. Who doesn't have Slack in this room? Right. So that's now chat is becoming more of a utility. Now we have to make the decision to kill that within the platform and let people use modern chat technology, which I think is great. So fun story again. I was at QCon a month ago, I don't know, and we were in the open space, and I said, I love legacy, I love killing things, and I kept talking, and like the whole room just immediately, I'm like, no, killing things so that you can buy it in another fashion. Anyway, so the interesting thing here that happens with people, we've been talking a lot about technologies, the interesting thing here that happens with people is that things that are in Genesis, right, where we're testing out these new ideas, you have to have you have to have lots of people who know lots of different things there together, yes? As you evolve things, you're hoping that you need less people for more scale, right? So people don't like that. They don't like hearing, we're going to need less people in the future. Employees, aren't you excited about that? Yeah, but it is the truth. But if you're in a long historied organization, I'm going to say that rather than a dinosaur, right? But if you're in a long historied organization, you have people who are working on these core technologies like Ray, right, who have this history of things, this rich history of things, yeah? And so you can use that, you can leverage that. As you evolve that technology and it's more repeatable, you need less people pushing buttons because those things are automated. Now Ray can go out to those customers or other components that had reservations about driving some of the variability out of that component, right? Ray can now go out to those folks, whether they be customers or they be other teams within the organization, and say, this is how you interact with our platform now that we've driven out some of that variability. Yes, we took away some of the customization, but now you can create that customization in real time. Let me help you enable that within your component or whatever the case may be, right? So now we're taking those people with that deep knowledge of the history of the company and treating them basically as SMEs, right? As internal consultants, where they go out to other components and advise them, this is how you consume this core platform. And then they're also noticing the trends as they're out there talking to people, right? So then they can gather those trends and say, this is how we need to further evolve that platform. Does that make sense to everyone? So now we have this bi-directional communication, and what would Conway say about that? Probably good, right? Yeah. So I've talked now about the technology, how we're thinking about evolving the technology, and I've talked a bit about the design of the organization or the people. I don't like using just the word people. Just think of like cyborgs or something. You're like, we're evolving the people. No, we're evolving the design of our organization, what those people do and everything like that, right? What are we missing? Not a trick question. process, yes. No one wants to be that guy that's like, oh, process, yay. Yeah, so we could do the same mapping exercise with the processes, right? So deployment, if you have this highly custom thing, there's a good chance that your deployments are highly visible to customers, right? And that they're highly variable. So then we can say, if we move this, what skill set will we be unlocking to be used elsewhere in the organization? Yes? So on the same map, you can map the technology, the people, and the tools. What I think is another interesting pattern is that as we move things more towards commodity, we break them down and treat them as individual things. So we're moving deployment towards commodity. That means that we need to break out things like reporting and things like that, right? So you've automated your deployments, you have some canary, it goes out, and then what? Do you check on it yourself? No, you probably get some sort of email or something to summarize how it's going and decide if you want to proceed. So again, we're following that same pattern where it's not that I am asking someone to do that specifically for me, it's that I'm now being enabled to say, yes, we should continue with this deployment or not. Does that make sense to anyone in this room? Does that not make sense to anyone in this room? Interesting. That guy, I don't know if he has a question or if he's stretching, but save it. All right, so we're deciding how we can evolve these things and modernize these things in pursuit of these goals that we have. Ultimately, what we've talked about here is decreasing the amount that we are invested in maintenance, yes? So that we can increase the amount that we are invested in metabolizing new information, right? Yeah. Why do people die? It's because over your lifetime, as you get older, you devote more and more of your total resources to maintenance, and then you lose the ability to absorb variability in your environment. That's why elderly populations are susceptible to things like the flu and are affected in a different way, right? Because there's already a significant amount of resources devoted to maintenance, so then there's not so much resources available to absorb that variability. Same thing with our organizations, right? If we are overcommitted in maintenance, then we will lose the ability to absorb variability from our market and our industry, right? So as we move things, as we evolve things towards that commodity utility, that's where we are increasing our ability to absorb these disruptions within the market. So, not 193 ways. Very sad news for you. It's actually significantly more than 193 ways. Yes, so I think there's an infinite number of ways that you could chart your progression towards that, right? Like you should see how many of these little charts I have. Like for this specific thing, I think it's gonna follow this meandering path, right? But there's really one thing that is important if you are evolving something, not starting from scratch. I think it's practicing an appropriate respect for history. Yes? So not saying legacy is bad. If legacy is bad, I want you to take all your credit cards out of your wallet and cut them up right now. Come on, people, let's go. Yeah. So I think it's really important that we practice this appropriate respect for history. We can say that things were amazing in the time that they were created, but now it's a bit anachronistic and it's not appropriate for this time, right? And it's kind of the same thing that we were talking about earlier. The last speaker, she's talking about not making judgments on the past, right? But just taking an account of how we got here. And I think if you're going to evolve anything, if your core platform is not a product of the 21st century, then I think the most important thing you can do is practice this respect for history. And that's all she wrote. Oh, wait, one more thing. In Atlanta, when I was there just a couple weeks ago, I intentionally antagonized John Willis in my talk to make the open spaces and stuff like that more interesting, but I didn't do it in this, but I do promise a very exciting fishbowl because I'm very good at antagonizing people. And that's it.
We have time for a couple questions if anybody has any.
Stretching guy, how you feeling over there?
Yeah.
Question?
I don't know if this is a worthwhile use of everyone's time, but I was a little bit curious about what making space on that map meant. I could
What,
kind of,
vacant space?
making space.
Oh, making space.
And how moving things
Making
around makes space. I could tell that it was resources, but I didn't really have a deep understanding there.
Go back to podium display, please.
All right. Yeah, so basically any of this space, right, that's where we could begin to make other strategic moves, right? If our core platform is at the top, we need space to build relationships on top of that, right? A relationship is, I hope there are no like social theory people in the room, but it's a collection of transactions, right? Where we get closer and closer to what the people want in the end. So we can't do that purely in the transaction engine. We need other systems that will make sense of those transactions to try to treat an individual as an individual. If the core platform is at the very top, where do we put those other pieces? Right? It just doesn't there's literally not space to put those other pieces. So I think it's just a good visualization to say, if you want to do these other things, right, then you need a space. If you're trying to absorb variability close to the customer, then you need a lot of space for a lot of things to happen, right? That means that your transaction engine needs to take up relatively less space. So I think of this as being a visualization of how much we're committed to maintenance versus metabolism. So here we've created all of this space above the core platform. That's where we're creating the space for metabolism rather than maintenance. I crossed this line with my arm. Is it gonna look like I have no arm?
But it's magic because now it's back.
Okay.
Right here in the front. And we'll do one last question.
Yeah, so kind of going back to that, an example I was thinking of is you guys just recently, like last year or something, started doing these like verified pre-sale things, right?
Yeah.
So in order to have you had to put a bunch of engineering
Yeah.
effort into making that happen, right? So you couldn't spend it as much on,
Right.
for instance, making your just regular ticket sales stuff better.
Yeah.
You're doing something
we had
completely
to
new.
count on my platform, this engine, right, being very reliable so that we could use all of those resources in order to do that. And that's actually a really fascinating story because what happened is other resellers were selling tickets before they bought them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like pretty wild.
I will say as a success
Like,
story,
true.
I actually got tickets to things I wanted to go to
All
that were hard to
right.
get.
One
because of
person
that.
in this room thinks Ticketmaster
One
is
thing.
not evil. All right.
Yeah, one thing.
There might be another one that won't admit it. Can we give another hand to Kat, please?